Greetings, customizers. Welcome to the next adventure of Talking Hands Customs. To all my subscribers, hello. To all those new to the channel, hello. So we are going to do a vehicle spotlight on the HISS tank. In this case, the HISS tank itself is deceptively simple. It's a simple design. It does lend itself well to some beautiful color blocking. However, it is loaded with paint traps. What's a paint trap? Well, when you go to spray something, the air current mixes around in all these little nooks and crannies, and essentially the paint doesn't deposit where you think it's going to or where you want it. That's not to say that something that you want red will suddenly be green, but what it means is anything you want to put paint on will not stick there, in which case have your brush and a cup of your appropriate paint on standby. So without further ado, let's get into it. This is a 25th anniversary HISS, and it already kind of proves my point. The original HISS was a solid black vehicle, which is cool, it's Cobra, it's simple, but that's just it. It's a little too simple. In this case, the 25th anniversary does a little bit of a step towards the Sunbow cartoon and makes the treads and the turret a different color. Here, they are a kind of metallic, oh, there's so many different ways I could describe that color using model paints, but it would be like an exhaust color, almost like the same color as like an afterburner on a jet fighter or something like that. And the turret's the same color. And what that does is it shows you that if you take the HISS and break it up into three groups, the treads, the hull, and the turret, and you can start mix matching colors, and you're good to go. You got one color for each. What tends to work rather well is if you have the treads the same color as the turret in this case. So picture, if you will, solid red turret or treads and a red turret, and that would look rather striking. If you wanted to, with a clear canopy like this one, you could even tint that red, and I think that would look fantastic. It would match that Cobra Commander that has the black outfit, but with the red boots, gloves, and mask. I think that would look pretty cool as their command tank. And if you wanted to, you could drill a hole in there, pop in an antenna, and it becomes a command tank for radio communications and stuff like that. And that's just it. The HISS itself has been relatively unchanged. However, the devil's in the details. So the foot pegs on the 25th, the vintage, and the retro line are all different sizes. So just keep in mind that depending on what figures you use, if it's the 2000s version, the Real American Hero Collection, the vintage, the new O-rings coming out from Super 7, whatever, check your foot pegs first and just make sure that those are good to go. They also break off a lot on the vintage tanks. So you might want to either A, even it out by cutting the other one off, or realizing you got to replace that with some styrene, and that you'll get some paint transfer if you paint it the same color as whatever color you're making it. So in that regard, the HISS tank should be looked at in its basic pieces, and I have one already disassembled for you. The reason why I've done that is because we're going to take a retro line one apart here and show you the ins and outs. Why don't I do it to a vintage one? Well, we're going to talk about that. So I want you to see what the parts look like in their true form or their natural form. So let's start off with the treads. So once you disassemble the tank, the treads come apart even further. So they'll split and the tow hook will come off. The tow hook has paint traps right here in the back. What you want to do is when you're painting this is make sure you get into this well here. Because when you look at it from the top, if all you do is paint the outside surfaces, you will get a lot of original plastic showing through down there, and that will break the illusion you're trying to create. The same thing with the treads itself. There's no glue on these ones like there is on a vintage one. If you try and pull a vintage one apart, you may break yourself or your spirit. I'm not sure which. You don't necessarily need to do it because you can mask it off with tape. So you don't need to worry about getting tape in all here, but you can see if you wanted to, for whatever reason, that there's a lot of walls and gunnels in here for the paint to swirl around in and not really adhere to where you want it to. You want to get the back in here for where the tow hook is. Make sure you get all the sides of the tow hook because the way that sits in, it will cover most of it, but just in case, you never know, you might be able to see down in that little crack there. The good news is that that's all covered when you reassemble the tracks. The bad news is you have to get inside this wheel well in here because that's where your running wheels are going to be, which are right here. You can keep these the same color if you wanted to, because we're worried about transferring paint onto whatever surface you're displaying on, depending on the conditions in your home and the place you live and all that kind of stuff. It's very dry where I live, so it's not a huge concern. But having black runner wheels on whatever color you decide to make this isn't the most egregious thing that can happen to you. And because they're hidden, it wouldn't break the odd numbered color rule. With the detail side of the tracks, these are some of the best details I've seen in a toy, and I love this. The one thing I remember with the HISS all the time is that the treads are this triangular shape, and I'll be leveraging that in a future custom. That's a surprise for later. But if we look in closely here, you can see this road wheel here has sprockets, these little lines coming out, and dimples, those little loaf of bread, whatever you want to call them, Pac-Man ghost shape looking things. If you just spray directly onto it, there's actually enough structure here that the paint will not adhere to where you want it to, and you'll get false shadowing. If you want to call that weathering because you want to be more realistic, go for it. Just keep in mind that if you want to do the Hasbro thing like I do, you're going to want to make sure you've got your paintbrush on standby to fill in anywhere else that if you are using spray products like an airbrush or spray cans, that you get the coverage you want. The same thing with these armor panels beside here. They are so thick that they create these walls, these trenches in here that have to be filled in, all with all these little detailed greeblies and pistons and whatnot. It looks fantastic. It's an absolute pain to get paint in there. So just be mindful while you're working on that. It will take some extra effort. It's not insurmountable. It just takes a couple of extra steps. So that's the treads, and I'll just quickly reassemble these. While I'm doing that, in case you haven't heard, recently or relatively recently, it has been discovered that Tamiya paints may not be, their spray paints, may not be in the, how do I say this? They're unhealthy, carcinogenic, evidently. If you haven't heard about that already, their spray can line, it's being discontinued up here in Canada or not being sold anymore in Canada. I know some places have more stringent laws than others in regards to those kinds of products. So that's me just telling you, hey, if you're using that stuff, you might want to stop. I have. There's my public service announcement right there, or at least one of them. So the next part is the hull. And the hull itself splits. And it does so with that little tab in the back you've always been wondering about. Okay, that's going to be the one you're going to actually use to separate the hull. And then these clips here, they're already separated, but normally they'll be flush, and they'll look like foot pedals here in the front cockpit. So you need to push on this tab and pull on this lip in order to separate that. Once you do that, the nose will still be stuck together. If you just pull apart like this, it'll be loud. It'll scare the bejeebus out of you, but it'll come apart without breaking, usually. Everything here is a usually. Sometimes it breaks in there. I have no control over that. Ask me about my fire bats. Oh, geez. Anyway, so let's talk about the hull. Let's do the lower part first here. So when you're dealing with this, the HISS tank, when you take the turret off, lends itself well to an APC style of thing because you have this big cavern in the bottom here, and maybe you've done it already as a kid or whatever. You can sit dudes on there loosely. So if you decide to make that more of a permanent arrangement, keep in mind you'll want to spray paint the entire, or you'll want to paint the entire inside of the bottom of the hull. In here, it honestly doesn't hurt. You don't see much about it, but just in case your eye wanders in there and you're over time, when you get used to looking at something, you can pick it apart more. You might want to get paint on the inside here just in case eyes do wander, which now leads me to the first of many traps. This little wall right here that goes all the way around the nose. There's a little gap here for the headlights, comes all the way back around here. That is an absolute paint trap. Make sure you paint it while the hull is separated. If you're not separating the hull for whatever reason, that's fine. Just ensure that you get proper paint coverage in there with your paintbrush, because if it doesn't get in there, it will absolutely drive you nuts and it will look horrible. And that's all there is to it there. There are two clips from the treads that come up through here. And I will show you on the Retroline HISS. No, that's the vintage HISS, and this is them broken. So there you go. These clips will break at least 50% of the time if you're dismantling a HISS. Here's what they look like on the Retro HISS, these big tabs here. In fact, I broke this vintage one making this video. They will be through the hull in this rectangular slot. My tool of choice is a flathead screwdriver because unfortunately I don't have a tool that's strong enough and wide enough to do both tabs at the same time. Doing one at a time doesn't necessarily work either. If you can get, maybe soak the whole HISS in hot water, I haven't tried that yet, or if you can get hot air flowed through the turret hole into here to pry those off, you can. Try that and see if you can get those tabs to move. They are strong tabs, but they are brittle, so they will break easily once forced past a certain point. And the hole you have to manipulate it through is this. So you have to get down in there, which is why I use the screwdriver. There is good news though. if you break the tabs on that part of the treads, excuse me, the HISS tank, the way it works is this tab goes into this lip. Then the back rotates down onto those clips. There's two hooks here on the tail hook that then essentially hook into the back of the wall here. They don't snap on, but they do help keep it in place so that when the hull is seated properly, it's still attached to the wheels. However, if you go to rotate the hull, it comes right off with no resistance. So if you choose to not glue it, for example, if you think maybe, hey, a few years down the road, I might want to repaint this or something like that, I would keep it free so that way you can still disassemble the vehicle. It does not take away from the displayability of it at all because the clips are internal. But if you want to, you can also glue it because there is enough mating surface there between the upper and lower hulls. You'll be able to glue it in a couple of places, no problem. So just keep in mind that if you break it, it's not a deal breaker or a game changer. It's just something that's likely to happen given the nature of those pegs in particular. Even on this retro line HISS, the previous owner had assembled it, then disassembled it and put it back in the box to make it look like it was fresh or whatever. There are stress marks here. And actually, I'll pull this apart so you can see it even better. So, pardon my focus. There we go. That there is not the light. I mean, yes, the light's hitting it, but that is a stress fracture. That's the solid plastic color back there. So you can tell they tried to use something there. They jammed at it with some kind of a tool. Let's get it to focus. There you go. You can see all those gouges in it. They tried to do it to get the tank out, and it was mostly successful. And there's even stress marks on the bottom part of that one. So whatever they did, it worked-ish. Once I get this HISS tank together in its new form, it's not coming apart. So don't let that dissuade you. It's just one of those things. There's a couple of vehicles like that in the line. Some of the plastics they used got old and brittle, or the design wasn't meant for it to come apart and be taken, back and forth numerous times. It was some assembly required, and then play with it, kid. So there's that to keep in mind. Now we'll look at the upper hull. Same thing. You want to get the paint in here. This is the upper half of that trench. You might see it from a different angle. In that case, because it's black, if you don't prime the tank or anything like that, you'll see it as a harsh shadow that won't look natural. So you want to make sure you get paint all in there. You don't have to worry so much about in here. You can if you want to, but quite frankly, the tabs that come up through the footwell here are so solid that it's not a big deal, but it's your choice. The other ones, you could notice that one there is not very likely. You will have to touch up the pegs though, so keep that in mind, especially if you're making the lower hull a separate color from the upper hull. There's a little bit more detail in this than there was in the original. Some of it's the same, some of it's new. These newer retro line ones were made in Vietnam, not Hong Kong, so the plastic also feels different. And again, with the 3 pegs instead of 2 on the original vintage HISS. But once you get in here, the other paint trap is this canyon right here. And this accordion type material here. I know it's not an actual accordion, but it just sounds funny to say that. You want to make sure your paintbrush is on standby to make sure you get paint in all of those crevasses as well. And that's really the size of it. So a few paint traps in there. Either side of the footwells, there'll be a paint trap here. So just pay attention to while you're doing that. And don't forget to get all up inside the headlights in here. That will absolutely not get covered with paint if all you do is hit it from this angle or even the front. You want to make sure you get it from underneath and the sides as well. Now moving on to the turret. Turret, lots of paint traps inside. The console here is screwed on just like in the 25th anniversary, but in the vintage, it is a snap with pressure clips. So be mindful of that. Again, if you break those pressure clips, I've never had it happen to me, but if it does happen to you, just glue the turret back on, you'll be fine. This is the retro line. It's got 3 tabs instead of 2. And this lip here must absolutely be covered in paint, or else when it sits on the hull, you'll see it as a side and it'll be too forced to look like an accidental shadow. And of course in here too, there's a lip around the edge underneath here. So again, have your brush on standby to fill all that in, and in here as well. Quite frankly, this whole thing is a paint trap. Once you shoot down inside the turret here, the splitter plate is there to keep your soldiers' feet facing forward, so they're always oriented the right way in the turret. Make sure that your painting efforts don't focus on the outside, on the easy parts first. get your spray paint in there, or your airbrush paint in there, your brush paint, whatever you're doing, get it in there first. All the easy to cover areas will be covered easily. So you run a risk of getting the an overflow of paint in here. So be mindful of that. And then again, once you put it all together, the nice thing is that it does have that friction point to it, so you won't get saggy cannons anymore. They'll stay parallel with the hull, which is what we want aesthetically anyway. So without further ado, let's talk about first custom. There is my Sunbow HISS. It's a simple thing right off the bat. This is a retro line HISS, so it was all black, and all I did was mask off the treads. I pulled it apart, masked off the treads, and painted these a light gray, and that's all I did. And what it does is it makes it look just like the cartoon. The stickers all come from the original tank toy. These Cobra symbols, however, came from a custom sheet. They have white background, and they're slightly larger than the original ones on the tank, just to make it look a little bit more like the cartoon. The numbers were sometimes on the cartoon tanks, if I remember correctly, sometimes not. So if you wanted to leave the numbers off, that's cool. There are sticker sets available, so you don't always have to do the 788, but I kind of dig that because this is kind of the way I hope the HISS tank looked when I was a kid, that it had the gray treads on it. The solid black mass was cool, but it was kind of boring. And that's all there is to it. If you wanted to go even more, let's call it cartoon accurate, if you wanted to, this black's pretty good. It's a lighter black. If you wanted to do a black gray, where it's basically a few tints off of black, then that would work too, and it would really give you that cartoon aesthetic. But that's all there is to it. And I've got some 2002 Cobra soldiers. These ones are from those like 5-pack from Toys R Us or whatever. Just keep in mind that the foot pegs are different sizes, as I said. So he'll stand on there, but he won't stay on there. But he does fit nicely in the turret because all it has is that splitter plate. Same thing in the cockpit. That's another 2002 Cobra Trooper, but he fits in there just fine. Canopy's nice and good to go. There is a slot up in there now too. 25th had it. I don't remember if the vintage had it or not. No, the vintage does not have it. I'm looking at it right now. So there is that slot in there. So depending on what you're doing with your paint and everything, just keep in mind that, especially if you're tinting the canopy. And I'll show you up close, that slot right in there, okay? So that's a simple custom you can do, which is just changing the color of one thing. And actually, I'll just bring it back up here for a sec with the 25th anniversary. So the 25th anniversary did have the lighter tracks and the lighter turret, but I think that this version kind of brings it across better for the cartoon, but it's all in the eye of the beholder, right? So your custom, do what you like. The next one is a super fun one, which I already did a video on, but I'm going to show it again anyway, as it is a HISS tank. And it's the Septic Tank Mark II. It kills me saying Septic Tank. Whoever thought of that was a genius, because this Septic Tank was full of crap. So I wanted to redo it. The idea with the water squirty thing and the weird thing here was blah. I see what they did, but I thought it would look better as almost like an accessory pack that was stuck onto a regular HISS tank. So for this one, a quick rundown is it's got the fluorescent green paint. I kept the tracks solid black, and the central part of the turret is black, but I changed the color of the guns, added some hoses to them, to this creation on the back, which is supposed to be the toxic waste tank or whatever you want to call it. And what it does is it brings that third color along. So we've got the black, the fluorescent green, and the orange. You got your three colors, and they're quite balanced. It doesn't mean that there's exact volumes of the same color, but that it actually works as a design. And the cool thing with this, which I'm actually going to show you, I was wondering if I should or not. Why not? Got to get all my background lights off here, so just bear with me for a second. Is that when you use fluorescent paint, certain magical things happen. And those magical things are called effects. So in this case, it was a happy little accident, and I discovered this with my Night Force stuff as well. But I totally forgot about this. But when you use fluorescent paint, under certain circumstances, it tends to fluoresce. So now I've got this wicked glow-in-the-dark mini golf septic tank, which sounds really amazing. Yeah, and it really works well as a custom. And if you don't believe me, I'll show you my Night Force under these lighting conditions. It's even better in person, but you get the idea. So it glows in the dark. So let's get, or it fluoresces, I should say. It doesn't glow. So let's get the real lights back on here and we'll carry on. But I just wanted to show you that because I thought it was pretty neat. Let's get the ambience there. There we go. And we will get this up and running. And there you go. I'll absolutely show you that with my Night Force in another separate video, maybe a short or something like that. So that's the Septic Tank Mark II. Then I have one that's still technically a work in progress, because I'm not entirely happy with it. And this one here serves as a good announcement to say, if you're working on a complex project and it takes a long time, that's fine. You're on your own schedule. None of this stuff has to be done by any other schedule other than your own, unless you're doing commission work, in which case, well, you know, stand up and finish it, or whatever the cool saying is nowadays. I don't even know. Okay, so we've got the Sky Hiss here. The chrome was brought to you by Molotov Chromes. They're an ink that comes out of a pen or a refill. You can slap it in your airbrush and you can airbrush chrome on now. It's a relatively delicate finish. I'm still learning it. This has been painted this way for on and off a year now, I guess. So I'm still learning it before I go haywire with it. But as a Sky Patrol vehicle, I masked off the center there to keep the black. It almost acts like that natural shadow, like I said. With the Sky Patrol tan tanks, or tan treads, excuse me. You could have made the whole thing tan. That would have worked too, as a HISS toy. And then this turret is a Wolverine turret, but it's a 3D printed Wolverine turret. So yeah, it was designed to fit in the HISS tank. And you can find it on Etsy. I forget the name of the seller, but they're there. So there's another way you can turn a HISS tank into a vehicle. In this case, it's converted into a G.I. Joe vehicle. Again, a retro line HISS. And of course, the HISS that I made specifically for this episode is my SAM HISS. Rather than the SMS, it's SAM for surface to air missile. Yes, it's got some guns too. And this one I wanted to make red, much like the Sears one. In fact, these are replacement Sears stickers available from Toy Hacks. And I made the treads a light gray. So it's almost like a Crimson Guard weapon, although I have a regular Viper in there. But yeah, I just wanted to leverage that Cobra red, black, and silver. The missiles themselves are 3D printed as well, come with the turret. They're a little loose, so you could do some stuff like clear nail polish and stuff to make it stick better, but I was fine enough with it the way it was. But this is what I created for this episode specifically. So you can see I made sure to get paint in those paint traps all the way around inside of the headlights, all up and down underneath, okay? All around that ledge there. Hold on, let me recenter here. All around that ledge there, inside the accordion shape, down in this canyon here, upper and lower hull, all the bits here, even these little greeblies on the side of the lower hull can be paint traps as well. The swim deck underneath, I left the tow hook black to match the rest of the hull. And there you go. So with that, you can see the color balance already. The light gray is a nice accent color, then you got the red and the black. And it's balanced given the mass of the tracks, the missiles, the hull, the turret, and even the darkness of the cockpit here. So it works quite well in my opinion. And of course the black underneath there for the natural gap in between the tracks. So you've got yourself the SAM HISS. That's just a working name, by the way. I don't know actually what I'm going to call it yet. And there you have it. So let's bring my Sunbow HISS back up here. Actually, you know what? Let's not distract. Let's just take the regular one. So 25th century HISS. 25th century. Buck Rogers. Yeah. 25th anniversary HISS. So there you go. The HISS tank itself works beautifully in color blocking just with its own design. If you wanted to take the turret off, remember that if you want to scratch build something else, there are little considerations for the top of the tank, but it'll work just fine. You can add extra armor on the sides here. None of this detail in here is anything that would stop you from doing whatever it is you want to do. You can cover it with extra plating if you wanted to. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, future episode. And the HISS tank works very well, especially with a lot of these clear canopies. If you haven't seen it yet, there's a lot of chapters in my other videos that talk about tinting clear canopies using clear paint, in which case this lends itself extremely well to that. Even if it's just tinting with the smoke color from Tamiya, then you're good to go there, but you can use clear green, blue, orange, whatever you want. And there you go. It's the HISS tank. It's simple. It can be an absolute trap if you're not paying attention, but it's there for you to customize, and it is fantastic. I hope you like the examples I shared with you today. I know I do, and there are more on the way for future episodes. I hope all your projects are going very well. If they're not, why don't you just take a break, step back from them, watch a couple episodes of my show, refine your mojo, recenter yourself, and come back at them with a smile on your face, because this stuff is all supposed to be fun at the end of the day, okay? So having said that, to all my subscribers, thanks again. And if you're new to the channel, why don't you subscribe? That way you can get notifications every time I come up with something new or find a new way to break something. And in the meantime, be safe and have fun.